The New York Mets inducted 4 new names into their Hall of Fame this weekend. Who are some other names who should be considered for the Mets Hall? Let's talk about it. Well, welcome back to New York Sports WickerMedia. I'm Watsu-K99. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to watch these videos. If you're brand new, welcome aboard. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate it. And if you're returning, welcome back. Please like as well. So this weekend, in this just disgusting series against the Toronto Blue Jays, the New York Mets inducted 4 new names into their Hall of Fame. You have former players Howard Johnson and Leiter, as well as broadcasters Gary Cohen and howierose. Now, I wanted to spend just a moment and talk about each of those names, but what we're also going to do today is to talk about who I think should be the next 4 names inducted into the Mets Hall of Fame. We're going to give you some numbers to talk about why, but I do want to acknowledge the 4 men who went in this weekend. So, first of all, Howard Johnson. You know, I actually got to meet Hojo this year at a Mets Nationals game. He came up, partied with us. It was him along with Ed Lynch, and we're going to put those pictures up here on the screen for you right now. Hojo, I got to tell you, is super nice, super engaging, and I got to tell you, he was seriously humbled and seriously happy about going into the Hall of Fame. You know, when I talked to him, even though he's got a very sort of like monotone sort of voice, a very straightforward voice, you know, talking with him, I could tell it really meant a lot to him. He was genuinely humbled and grateful to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. You know, growing up in 1981, I sort of remember Howard Johnson as being like sort of the breakout star, even after the Mets' glory days had ended. You know, he seemed to do his best in the odd number years, 1987, 89, 91, you know, going 30-30. I remember the race as a kid for 40-40. Would he get the 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases? I believe he came 4 home runs short in that one year. I believe it was 1991 when that went down. But yeah, Hojo was, there was something about a switch hitter. You know, growing up, you know, I'm a right-handed hitter, and I just know every time I would try to swing left-handed, it was like the most awkward feeling in the world. And Hojo was that first switch hitter who I could remember making it look so easy and so natural. And I just really remembered admiring Hojo for his hitting ability. So major congratulations on a personal level to number 20, Howard Johnson. Leiter, I remember as the workhorse of the Mets staff. You know, the Mets got him in a trade with the Marlins, A.J. Burnett, and a couple of other prospects. You know, Leiter just had a rubber arm. You know, for so long, it felt like Leiter would go 3-2 on just about every single batter, but he'd often find his way out of the jam. You know, he could throw 100, 110, 120 pitches, you know, without too much of a problem. And he didn't even come to the Mets till his early 30s. You know, he spent 7 years in a Mets uniform. But, you know, he really had some good, solid years with the Mets. And, man, I remember, you know, you had a lot of extreme ends with Leiter. You could talk about the shutout, the 9-inning complete game shutout against the Cincinnati Reds on the road to win the 1999 wild card, game 163. Leiter was fantastic. I mean, especially considering he walked the leadoff batter in that game and came back to just shut the Reds down. And that was a pretty good lineup, you know, a Reds lineup that had the likes of Barry Larkin, Jeffrey Hammonds, Dimitri Young, some pretty good players back then. I remember Eddie Taubensee was one of the better hitting catchers at the time. Sean Casey, who would go on to have a very good career as well, was there. And Leiter just shut them down that night and propelled the Mets into the National League Division Series. But then on the other hand, you do have the absolute disaster in Atlanta, Game 6, when he could not record an out. Now, over the years, I've come to give Leiter a little bit of forgiveness, because if you go back to Game 5 at Chase Stadium, you know, the game that the Mets won on the Grand Slam single with Robin Ventura, you know, Leiter was warming up just a day and a half earlier during that Game 5, because the Mets had used every pitcher, you know, to their disposal. I think Octavio Dotel pitched 3-4 innings. They were going to have to bring in Leiter. He was the last pitcher left in the bullpen. And warming up like he did wore him out for Game 6. And, yeah, the Braves absolutely pulverized him. Of course, the Mets did come back in that game. But yeah, that's probably one of the more disappointing starting pitching outings that I've ever seen a Met have. But there is a reason behind it. So over the years, I've been able to give Leiter a little bit of grace for that. So very happy for Leiter. It just comes across as a quintessential New York guy. Now, I know he's from Toms River, New Jersey. You know, I'm a Jersey guy like he is. But you could tell he is a Met. He was a Met from the time he was a kid. His whole family is Mets fans. He wanted to be a Met. He stayed a Met. And I think at the end of the day, he would define himself as a Met. Not a Blue Jay, not a Marlin, and certainly not a Yankee. So props to Leiter. Now, as for the broadcasters, I'm going to lump them in together. Howierose and Gary Cohen, I can't imagine listening to or watching a Mets game without them. They have sounds. I mean, there are a lot of broadcasters who are just good, solid, professional broadcasters. You know, I think of like the Keith Rads, the new radio guy in the booth. I think of Steve Gelbs, that he fills in for Gary Cohen when Gary's out. But they're just generic guys. They're okay professional guys, but there's something when you have a broadcaster and they have a sound, like a distinctive sound, like you hear the voice and you know who it is. Whether it's Vince Scully in LA, whether it's Pat Hughes in Chicago, different guys like that. Even if you don't like him, John Sterling with the Yankees, he has this distinctive sound to him. Gary Cohen and Howierose have been that for me. I remember the 2 years they did together in the WFAN Mets radio booth, which was just unbelievable. I grew up on WFAN listening to Gary Cohen and Bob Murphy, and to me, there was no better 1-2 punch that I could ever imagine on the radio. And to this day, as good as Gary Cohen is on TV, I think of Gary Cohen as a radio guy. And I wondered to this day, man, if SNY hadn't come along, would Gary and Howie still be doing the games together on the radio? Because together, you could not touch that combination. You just couldn't. They're just amazing. But since then, Howie's been through so many different partners, whether it's... Man, there's so many names. What was it? Wayne Fagan, Keith Reb now. I always liked Wayne Randazzo. I mean, and just hear Greg Giannotti on WFAN in person. Just have fun with Wayne Randazzo, making fun of his old-timey voice like from the 1920s. Josh Lewin, though, to me is my favorite. Howie and Josh Lewin were an amazing combo together. But if I had to go with one radio tandem I've ever heard, it was Gary and Howie together. Thrilled for both. They are the defining voices, not just of my childhood, but now my adulthood as well. And I can't imagine another voice stepping in and being anywhere near the level of either of those two gentlemen. So, all respect to them. They absolutely deserve to be Hall of Famers. So, I now want to take a moment here and talk about another couple of players, personalities, who I feel should be in the Mets Hall of Fame. And I'm going to give you 3 players, a manager, and we'll just say a broadcaster as well. So the manager, to me, Bobby Valentine has to be in the Hall of Fame. You look at some of the numbers. He managed 1,003 games. That's third all-time in Mets history. 536 wins, also third all-time. A .534 win percentage, that's fourth. 13 playoff wins is the most in Mets history as well. And let's face it, Bobby's a character. He's a folk hero in Mets history, Mets, the New York Mets fans, we're not polished, we're not clean like the Yankees. We do it a little bit crazy, a little bit goofy, and to me, Bobby Valentine, he just epitomizes that. I mean, Bobby Valentine, to me, absolutely deserves to be a Hall of Fame. You still have Mets fans today who would love to see Bobby Valentine come back and manage the team. It is absolutely crazy. So, yeah, I think Bobby should be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Now, as far as players go, I'm going to give you 3 guys. Now, Davidwright is the obvious one. I'm sure he's going to be the next inductee. I'm going to go through a couple of numbers here. If you look at his WAR, if you want to go new age, 49.2, first all-time. He's first all-time in Mets history in at-bats, runs scored, base hits, total bases, doubles, extra base hits, RBIs, and he's second in games played and home runs. I mean, Davidwright pretty much owns the Mets record book when it comes to position players. So he really defines that era of the mid-2000s, really, for the Mets, from like 2005 to about 2015 or 16. And it's a shame, really, that his career ended as prematurely as it did with his back injuries. Who knows what his ceiling would have been. But what he gave the Mets while he was there was absolutely fantastic. But I would also, for number 3, I would put Josereyes into the Mets Hall of Fame. I know that's going to get a little bit of heat. I really don't care. I've always been a Reyes guy. I think I was always a Reyes guy over a David Wright guy. I've always had a thing for leadoff hitters, guys who have speed. I just thought Josereyes was, as far as a 5-tool player goes, an all-around package that you couldn't find pretty much anywhere else in baseball. The switch hitting, the speed, he had power, he could knock the ball out when he needed to. Fantastic defense, and he could run better than I think any player in Mets history as far as a regular long-term Met goes. If you look at his stats, he is second in so many categories right behind David Wright. At-bats, runs scored, hits, total bases, doubles, extra base hits. He's second in all those stats right behind David Wright. And of course, he leads the franchise in triples with 113. Just for comparison there, second place is Mookie Wilson with 62. Reyes has nearly twice as many triples as any other player in the 60-year history of the Mets. And as far as stolen bases go, well, he's got 408 as a Met. Mookie Wilson is second with 281. Josereyes was an electrifying, special player, and I really hope he gets the just that he deserves as an all-time New York Met, because to me, he absolutely is a weapon and a player the Mets have never had. Just an unparalleled player. I would also induct Carlos Beltran. This one's a little bit tougher, but if you look at what Beltran could do as an all-around player, to me, he is the best free agent signing the Mets have ever had. I mean, take a moment and think about it. Who are the other free agents the Mets have signed in their history that compare to Beltran? It's Curtis Granderson. It's Bartolo Colon. Who else are you going to give me? Billy Wagner? I mean, I don't know who else there is besides Carlos Beltran. And he was as clutch. He was far more clutch in those games than Reyes or Wright was. If you look at WAR, a 31.1 WAR, that's third all-time in Mets history. His OPS of 869, fifth all-time in Mets history. He had an 86% stolen base percentage, highest ever as a Met. If you go by another new age stat, wins probability added, which factors in not just your stats, but when you have them. So if you hit a home run in a tie game in the 9th inning, it means a lot more than a home run in the 6th inning when you're down 10 runs, okay? He is third all-time in wins probability added behind only David Wright and Darryl Strawberry. If you look at even 2008, that final game against the Marlins, Beltran, the last game at Shea Stadium, Beltran was the only one who showed up. He hit a couple of balls out that day. The rest of the offense played like crap. There's no other way to say it. So I think you can make an argument for Beltran being a Mets Hall of Famer. And there's one other name I would put in the Hall of Fame, and it's Edcoleman. Eddie C. was the voice of the pregame and the postgame for so long, retired a couple of years ago. I feel with Gary and Howie going in, Edcoleman is just as deserving, for the interviews he did, all the spots he did on WFAN with Mike and the Mad Dog, Joe and Evan, all those guys for so many years. Universally loved, universally respected. I really hope Edcoleman, even if he gets the Mets Achievement Award, like Jay Horowitz did on Saturday, I really hope the Mets take the time to recognize Edcoleman. He really, really deserves it. So those are 5 names that I think should get their just dues in the New York Mets Hall of Fame. But I want to see your thoughts. Do you have another name who should get inducted? Do you agree with my picks? Do you think maybe the Reyes or Beltran picks? Am I off my rocker with them? You could say it. I'll be all right. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching. I'll see you right back here with more content from you know where, the Wicker Chair.